Lewis, coming to you from the beautiful metaverse. And welcome to Midday with Rev Don. I hope you're having a lovely day. And feel free to make any comments you would like, ask any questions you would like. They'll show up in my chat room, and I will certainly answer them if I am able. And we will have a lovely midday conversation. And as you can see behind me, my library is slowly emptying as I prepare for my move back to the Karelian homeland, Danville, Illinois, where our tradition was founded many generations ago. Hello to Mary in the chat room. Karelian Wicca, as it's known today, was founded in 1879. What we would call it then is a subject of some debate. Depends on how you use the word Wicca, how you use the word witchcraft, how you use the word pagan, but we've been around for a long time, and I'm going back to where we came from. I'm going back to Lady Crystal and other members of my family, which is going to be quite lovely. Hello, John, in the chat room. And part of that is that I am selling off my library. Not all of the library, but a lot of the library. So if you're interested in any of the books, please follow our sales, and you can find those at Sir Edward's page, Ed Hubbard. I believe it's Ed A. Hubbard on Facebook. You can find the sale of my mother's jewelry and other family jewelry on my page, which my Facebook page, Rev Don Lewis. It might just be Don Lewis. Let me just have a quick look. No, Rev Don Lewis. Facebook.com/Rev Don Lewis. And I've actually found this a more enjoyable process than I perhaps had expected. I had, I mean, I regarded it as what needed to be done regardless, but I've come to think of this not as dispersing the collections that I have acted as guardian for all these years, but as sharing it with our Karelian priesthood, our Karelian members, because so many of the people who are buying the pieces, in fact, so far everyone buying pieces, are Karelian priesthood who've been with us in most cases many years, and are people that I know and love and cherish, and to see them going to these people is a wonderful enhancement. And John remarks that they did not know the Karelian tradition started in Illinois, and yes, it did. And hello to Ravenwolf in the chat room, and Ravenwolf wishes me a blessed Beltane, and a blessed Beltane to you, Ravenwolf, and to everyone watching. Today I'm going to talk a bit about psychometry. Hello to Anna in the chat room. And I'm going to talk about it at least a little bit in relation to the sale of these jewels. Obviously, I'm not letting go of everything, and I'm not necessarily letting go of my personal pieces, although there are a few pieces that belong to me as well. But for example, there is a parure that includes a brooch identical to this one. My mother often had multiple brooches in her parures and demi-parures, and this was because she wore them as scatter pins in her costumes. She would have not just one of them, but perhaps one on the shoulder, one on each side of the collar, one. Sometimes they became shoe pins. Sometimes they might appear on the purse that she was carrying, or on a hat. She used them in many ways, so there are often multiples. This one I am keeping, but the rest of the set is on my page for anyone who might be interested. But when we talk about psychometry, a piece like this that someone owned and used is going to have their energy on it. Some of these pieces were amulets that were used for particular purposes, and they will still have that energy. So you're getting not only the piece of jewelry, you're getting a little bit of the energy of everyone who has owned and handled it. And so in a manner of speaking, we're increasing the bonds between us as well as sharing some very nice vintage jewelry. You may have seen me the other day wearing this piece, which belonged to my grandmother and is not going in the sale, although other pieces of her jewelry have gone in the sale. But this particular one has special meaning, and I intend to continue to use it myself. But the reason I'm using it is as a key to her energy as one of the holy ancestors. And um, to keep her energy strong around me. Of course, it would be strong regardless, but the wearing of it helps with that strengthening and also pulls around me the energies that she invested in this. The garnet is the Corellian family stone, which makes it particularly special. And and she often wore it when she felt the need for extra strength. And so I've kept it for that purpose. And hello to Michael in the chat room. And Mary says that she loves the stories behind the pieces also. I'm very glad to hear that. There are many more coming. Um, my mother left something like 400 pieces of jewelry, and we've barely scratched the surface of that. Um, and so many more pieces will be coming. There are also a few pieces, as I say, that belong to my grandmother that will be making their way in. Hello to Mary in the chat room, and some that belonged to Caroline herself, the founder of the tradition. Um, we've had some back and forth about some of those. We're certainly not putting all of them in because we want to keep some of the things that belong to the founder of our tradition. But we don't have to keep every single item. And hello to Joanne in the chat room. Good to see you. Um, one of the things that we're talking about putting in is her dragon inkwell, which has been a semi-official um, piece of our first priesthood through several generations until it broke. Um, and it has been packed up with other things ever since that happened. The lid has broken. Could easily be repaired, but we are going to put it in at a large price because of what it is. And if it doesn't go, then I will repair it and keep it. Hello to Brian in the chat room. There are a couple of necklaces that belong to Caroline and a number of things that belong to my grandmother that are going in despite the fact that I'm keeping many others. And Mary remarks that she saw the dragon inkwell when she came recently to Chosen Path. And yes, it's a very beautiful piece. And Anna says, may Goddess and God protect you in your move. Thank you. I am certainly hoping so. I feel I make the same prayer. Mary asks, the inkwell belonged to who? It belonged to Caroline, who founded the tradition. It's from about 1890, give or take a year or two. So it's quite an old piece. And it passed from Caroline to Mabel, from Mabel to my mother Leveda, from my mother to me, and has remained with me ever since. And as I say, it's going to be a particularly large price because of what it is. But if someone's willing to do that, then I'm going to trust spirit that it should be with them. And if they're not, then it will stay with me. There are a couple of other pieces of, well, there are a number of ritual items coming soon. As we get through more of the jewelry, we're going to be putting up some ritual items that are going to be interesting to people, I think. One of them is the frontispiece from what was once the coronet of the Grand Oracle of Tradition. That too broke some years ago and was, I guess we'd say, decommissioned and used as an altarpiece instead. And we will be offering that, again, at one of the larger prices because of what it is. But I think that would be the only piece of First Priesthood regalia ever decommissioned and then offered for sale that I can think of. Not the only one ever given, because I can think of one other. But passing it on to someone else is not the same. This would allow it to go to anyone willing to have it. And I feel very strongly that what we're doing here is investing in the next generation of our tradition. I believe Spirit is guiding these pieces to the people who are meant to have them. And in some cases, I've been surprised by some of the people who have come forward to claim one or another pleasantly. And as I say, everyone, these are people who are taking the pieces that I love and honor, and I'm very happy to see them get them. And we're going to talk about psychometry today. And when you do psychometry, you're reading an object, and you're reading the energies that that object holds. Everything we do in life leaves an energetic residue. Everything we do leaves a little imprint of emotion. Um, if we are charging something, we leave energy behind from that charge, sometimes for a very long time, sometimes even when we didn't intend to. And so every object has the energy of the people it's come in contact with previously, unless it's been intentionally cleared. And sometimes even that isn't enough to get rid of it, depending on a number of variables. And in some cases, this is not necessarily a good thing. In others, it definitely is. When you're talking about an item that belonged to someone who is one of your teachers, someone who is one of your family members, someone you had a good relationship with, to have their energy still resonating through that object is a positive thing. But in psychic reading, the circumstances under which you are most likely to encounter psychometry is an item belonging to a living person who may be sitting right in front of you. For many years, I would ask to hold something that belonged to a client who wanted a clairvoyant reading, on the premise that I was doing part of the reading psychometrically. Um, Although that was only really true at the start, it was more to relax my mind by focusing on the object. But the object still had the person's energy, and certainly was helping the reading. Um, but when you do psychometry, what you're doing is really the same thing you do in any psychic reading, except that you're opening yourself to the energies on that object rather than, say, the person who you might be sitting with, or um, anything else that might convey their energy to you. And in psychic reading, we use a lot of keys to people's energy. Some psychic readers will ask for a person's birthday, for example, not necessarily for astrological reasons, but just to give them something to hold on to. Or they may ask for their name, or um, in an earlier period, some people would ask to hold the person's hand so they would have a physical connection. I don't know if there are too many people who still do that, because people are a little more sensitive to that today. But at one time, it was quite common. All of these are different keys that you can use to help access that person's energy, as is holding an object that belongs to them. Um, Reading from an object can also help you to read for a person who is not present, or a person who is no longer in the world of the living. Um, because the energy remains unless it's been intentionally cleared. And sometimes even then, depending on the nature of the clearing. Very often when people go to cleanse an object, they're cleansing negative energy from that object. That does not affect positive energy. It affects negative energy. So it depends on how it's been cleared on top of everything else. So if you have cleansed the negative energy from a thing, um, in all likelihood, the positive energy is going to continue to remain. And generally speaking, that's what we want. Not always, and some people will cleanse all energy from an item, and that depends on their personal practice and their personal needs, and also what the occasion and what the object are. Um, but when you are reading, therefore, if you're reading from an object, it will have that energy. You open to the energy, you feel the energy, and you interpret the energy just as you would any other. And you can get a lot psychometrically. Um, I I often refer to Rosemary Fletcher, who was, in my opinion, the best psychic I have ever known. And she specialized in palmistry. But if you ask her, she would explain that she wasn't really doing classical palmistry at all. She was doing what she called body psychometry, meaning she would hold the person's hand and examine their lines, but she'd get clairvoyant messages as she did this. She was effectively using their hand as a key to their higher self, and not really reading the lines at all, but um, but receiving their energy and reading from that. One of the things I think most people don't realize, and many schools of thought don't realize, is that people share energy all the time in every situation. Unless you have made a strong energetic shield to prevent it, this is always happening. And it's part of normal life. It's perfectly natural. Everybody puts off a lot of energy during their lifetime, and other people pick up on it. It's part of how we get gut feelings about each other. It's part of how we read each other's emotions. It's a normal thing. In some cases, it becomes unbalanced, and you might consider someone to be, for example, a psychic vampire because they take too much energy. Um, and that is something the person should learn to control and absolutely can learn to control. And then it's no longer necessarily negative once they've learned to control it and use it in a positive way. But some people are endless siphons of energy because they need so much and don't know how to compensate for that. Let us say that you yourself are an unintentional psychic vampire. Many people are. What could you do to counteract that? Well, the biggest thing is creating energetic batteries, which we teach you in our first degree lessons. And those energetic batteries could give you the energy that you're unconsciously taking from other people and totally change the situation. Um, Another is to learn when you are and are not doing it and use it only in consensual situations. And what kind of consensual situations would you have? Well, there's a whole vampire community that love this sort of thing and are very consensual. But there's also a very strong use of this in healing because a lot of people need to let go of certain energies. And a person who has a natural affinity for taking those in can actually be a really big help in that kind of healing. So the idea of the psychic vampire is actually a person who has a valuable skill they don't know how to use. Um, it is naturally alarming to people who have not fully understood that, and also when it's out of control. A lot of things are alarming when they're out of control that are perfectly normal in and of themselves. I think one of the things we need to do as a community is learn how to do that. Learn how to help people who are in that position to handle it better. But when we're doing psychometry, this is what we're doing. We're taking in the energy, in this case of an object, sometimes of a person. Almost every moment in life, we're taking in energy from another person, and especially in moments of intimacy. John asked, does being an empath make a difference in the way a person experiences psychic energy? I would say only in the intensity of the experience. I think that I think we all actually experience it, but most of us are not conscious of it. Um, and that too is one of the problems that we see in life that could be easily changed. Um, you'll see a lot of people who have terrible emotional difficulties, particularly relating to other people, that if they had more understanding of how to regulate their energy, would not manifest that way. We were talking about poltergeists the other day. If people understood, the people who are inclined to manifest poltergeists understood how to handle their energy, they would not have any problem at all because poltergeist is nothing but ungrounded energy. And should you have that kind of situation, if you learn to ground your energy, you will end your problem. Poltergeist manifests through things like furniture shaking, objects moving unexpectedly, doors opening and closing without warning. Um, and sometimes they only come at moments when an individual is in a high emotional state. Um, in fact, I would say that's general, but not the only occasion, but it's one of the main ones. And often if you find a poltergeist occurring in a household, one of three situations obtains. Very often there's an adolescent just entering puberty or early in puberty who is also highly psychic, although they may or may not know that, and their energy is bouncing everywhere and is ungrounding the energy of the house. Sometimes this can happen in other times of life as well. Um, Women in menopause sometimes have poltergeist experiences for this same reason because of the hormonal changes that are occurring. And people who are open psychics at moments of stress or difficulty sometimes have it too. Um, it can come anytime there's a lot of energy bouncing around that is not grounded and focused. And how do you deal with that? You ground it and focus it. I used to find myself kind of trapped occasionally into watching paranormal programs. Um, and I won't name any, you can think of them yourself. And I found them, in some cases, really good and fascinating, and in others, utter schlock. And I'm not going to say which was which, because you undoubtedly, if you've seen any of them, you've seen for yourself. Um, but what I'm about to say, well, and Reverend Ravenwolf, and I'll come back to this in a moment, Reverend Ravenwolf remembers that they remember what happened in their house just before their father crossed. And this is actually a perfect example of this. Reverend Ravenwolf is a medium. Reverend Ravenwolf works with energy all the time, and this was a highly emotional time because their father was just about to cross. It was emotional for them, it was emotional for their father, who probably was also highly psychic. I don't know if they did anything with it, but when the child is, the likelihood that the parent was is relatively high. Um, and there was serious poltergeist experience in that house right before this crossing, and it was captured on camera because we were in my chat room that night, and we could see these things happening. Um, and so, in case you think it's a myth or something people exaggerate, lots of people who might be here right now today saw that particular incident. I've seen others. I've been involved in some. Um, and sometimes also this kind of thing can be spirit activity too. But right now we're talking about poltergeists. And the kind of poltergeist program, or the kind of program that I found to be schlock, almost always ended the same way. They discovered a demon in the basement. Um, but what was it they were calling a demon? What showed them that this demon was present? Usually it was what I would call minor poltergeist activity. I remember one where I think it was a box of screws had flown off a shelf and struck someone in the back. That's poltergeist activity. And exactly as you would expect, the child of the house had just entered puberty. Um, all they needed to do was ground that energy. Instead, these people doing the paranormal research recommended they sell the house, move far away, and make sure they moved over running water. Totally unnecessary for this circumstance. And Mary in the chat room, hello, Mary. Mary says, uh, points out that she saw what happened with Ravenwolf on the night that their father crossed. A lot of people did. There were doors opening and closing, things moving around. It was very active. I've known this sort of thing to happen, sometimes as a sign from spirit, and sometimes as a poltergeist, depending on the circumstance. I've known people who have, and exactly where you draw your lines here um, are a little on the arbitrary side. But I've known people, for example, who are highly psychic, who, if they lose their temper, things will start moving around. That's the same basic thing as a poltergeist, but I don't know that I'd call it a poltergeist because they're aware of it. Other people will have this happen without any negative aspect to it at all. They can simply do certain things, and so that's another aspect. Again, I've known everybody, I think, has heard of the person who cannot wear a watch because their energy is so high, but that also means their energy is ungrounded or not sufficiently grounded. But I've had that problem myself. When I've done channeling with people, oracle work, we've often tried to record it, and after a certain point, I just had to stop because electronic machinery would not work when we were doing this. It would fry out. Sometimes the batteries would drain or be destroyed, or who knows. It's several different variations, but I eventually stopped trying to record that kind of session because so often it simply won't. I haven't had that happen yet with using online resources, though. So when I've done readings and seances online, I have been able to record those. But it's a different kind of technology than an old-fashioned tape recorder. Um, but so many of these different things come down to energy. This is why, and this is vitally important to understand, this is why in first degree, the very first things we talk about are grounding, releasing, shielding, proper psychic hygiene, how to take care of your energy, because it's very important to psychic work, very important to magical work. And not doing it has a lot of consequences. I've often talked about how when I was young, I worked in a psychic fair circuit with people who were primarily spiritualist and came from a background that did not teach these things. Um, in fact, I've been surprised over the years to find how many backgrounds don't. And what happened is because they weren't doing enough cleansing and grounding, they were filling up with the energy they were taking in from the psychic readings and energy they were building in other ways, and it was trying out their systems. And this is a very bad thing that can happen. You know, people love to talk about the dangers of psychic and magical work, and I'm not of the point of view that there are very many, but one um, is this: becoming ungrounded because you're not taking good care of your psychic hygiene. That I will agree is very, very important. Now, Mary says that she had a coworker who messed up the office printer and scanner simply by touching them. And yes, if the person's energy is very high, and particularly if it's also ungrounded, they can do that. I've seen people who will walk into a room and either intentionally or unintentionally turn on or off different electric appliances. I've seen people in whose presence lights will suddenly dim or go out. Again, I've known some people who could actually do that intentionally. Usually it's unintentional. Televisions being turned on and off. These are actual effects of ungrounded energy. And if you're in this work, you will eventually see it. So people ask me occasionally, is telekinesis real? And the answer is yes and no. I have seen people who definitely have telekinetic effects, and that's part of what we're describing, but usually not that they are in direct control of or have much control of. So I think that's a field where there's a lot left to be learned and a lot of development to take place, but is it a real thing? Yes, it actually is. Um, Most commonly, it's unintentional and unfocused. But some people have a certain amount of control over it. So these are some of the things that I would say about psychometry and about energy and about the importance of psychic hygiene. Um, and that brings us nearly to the end of our program. I hope that you've enjoyed it today. And I want to direct you to my Facebook page where later today, well, right now you can see a number of items for sale. Also to Sir Edward's Facebook page where a number of the books are for sale. And to keep following us for more offerings. Tomorrow there will be a number of additional pieces going up, just as there were this morning. I do have to say many of them are being taken almost as soon as they become available. Um, so if you want one, I would say don't delay because they're going relatively quickly. There are a few pieces available on the page right now. And of course, I know though there will surely be some that don't go. Um, but they have been very well received, and in fact, they are for the most part quite nice pieces. My mother loved jewelry, and she got most of her costume pieces from a company called Emmons, which I believe is considered eminently collectible. Um, Not many actual pieces are going to be offered in the sense of genuine gems, um, because I may need something to sell tomorrow. Uh, Plus, we want to keep some things from the ancestors for for the family itself. But there are going to be, for example, some things that were, for example, real jade, lots of semi-precious stones. I'm not expecting um, to put out any large genuine stones. But what's there is good. And one of the things we have coming is an Art Deco evening clutch that belonged to my mother and it's from a company called Volupta and is considered very, very collectible. You can find it for fairly high price online, and our price will probably be less. Plus, the one that we're offering comes with its original velvet bag, which generally has been lost in most cases over the years. So if you collect vintage pieces, it will be a good one to have. Hello to Ruth, White Wolf Bear, and blessed Beltane to you, blessed Beltane to everyone, and blessed Samhain to those in the Southern Hemisphere. And with that, we've come to the end of our half hour. We're going to close with a prayer, as we always do, and I will see you again tomorrow. I will tell you that Wednesday I will not be here because I have a doctor's appointment that I made before I started this broadcast, but I'll be back on Thursday as I normally am. And I will again be here tomorrow. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to help us as we go forward to be mindful of our energy and the energy of others, to know that we are in a state of constant sharing in every moment of our lives. We are not islands, but are influenced by everything around us. Help us, therefore, to keep our energy clean and pure, and to bring around us those things that we want to have around us, not simply those things that happen to be around us. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and with respect, and may you blessed be now and always. And thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow, and may you blessed be now and always.